Hey there, Solar Warriors. I'm Nico Johnson, and this is SunCast. Each week, I pull back the veil on the life and business insights of clean tech entrepreneurs building the most noble and impactful companies of our time. I hope what you learn from this conversation is a catalyst for your own growth. So thanks for tuning in, and welcome to our tribe. Hey, welcome to a new week, Solar Warrior. Here we go. This is 2 for Tuesday. Whether that's a tactical Tuesday or just content from one of our many live events like SPI Podcast Lounge, this is going to be a short form conversation, typically with subject matter experts designed to give you the practical tools, tips, and advice for building your solar business or career. And grow with us here on SunCast, as I know you will. I'm so glad that you've decided to join us again and level up your game. In this particular case, what you are about to hear is content from our Career Summit. Our Career Summit was a fantastic series of conversations all about not only how to find your dream job, the perfect opportunity to transition into clean energy as a career, but also how as an industry we can improve the concepts of hiring with justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We had some amazing conversations around that, and you're about to hear one of those right now. You can always find all of the resources and learn more about this episode over on the blog at mysuncast.com. For now, get ready to tune up your skills, Solar Warrior, as we tune in to another powerful conversation here on SunCast.
Welcome, everyone, to our third session of today. We are here, SunCast Career Summit, for breaking the glass ceiling, strategies for asking for the salary you deserve and getting it. Again, I am Glenda Johnson. I don't believe I've introduced myself to you all yet, but I am the marketing manager at SunCast Media, and I'm happy to join an esteemed panel of guests today for our session. I definitely want to make sure that we recognize our sponsors for today. We want to thank you, Light Source BP, Solaris Soul Systems, and a number of our other sponsors and partners who help make this summit possible across these 3 days of really great content and workshops. We also have a few sessions today and a few workshops tomorrow, but we wanted to make sure that you have access to all of these sessions. So if you are watching us on the live stream, you could access us at suncastcareersummit.com. If you're watching us live on LinkedIn or on Twitter, again, you could reach us at suncastcareersummit.com. We have 3 passes. The free pass will give you access to these sessions. But if you add the all access or the evergreen pass, you'll have access to the workshops and networking event. We had some great networking earlier this afternoon and last night on our AirMeet platform. So please definitely take a chance and also upgrade those passes. You will also have access to our Circle community. It is a unique community of all our speakers and all those who are involved with the session for you to connect with the community. That link will be provided to you on the pass and on the website, and as soon as you register. So for a limited time, it's accessible for those who have a free pass, and it's available to our evergreen and also to our all access pass members. So we have an amazing panel that will be talking today. We're going to be focused on breaking the glass ceiling, and I wanted to make sure that you guys all know that we wanted to make sure that this conversation is focused on making it very conversational and also making it really casual. I think we all have a unique perspective to share when it comes to sharing those type of strategies to break the glass ceilings. So I want to welcome in our guests first. I'm going to have them join me. We have Karima Ladhani. She is the founder and CEO of Barakat Bundle, a social enterprise that creates life-saving bundles for mothers and newborns in South Asia, supported by Harvard Business School, LinkedIn for Good, Johnson & Johnson, among others. She's also a board member for Ecologic, a nonprofit inspiring environmental action through providing practical ways to address climate change. Also, Tara Doyle, the Chief Commercial Officer at PV Evolution Labs. She built the foundation of PVEL's commercial operations when she joined in 2012 and is one of PVEL's longstanding employees. She began her career at SunPower, where she managed corporate operations and client engagement programs. And finally, Suparna Kadam. Suparna was a business development director with EnerSolar, focused on providing enterprise clients with comprehensive solar and storage solutions with a compelling long-term ROI. With over 15 years in the solar industry, she has worked throughout the solar value chain at solar module, electronics, and mounting manufacturers, and within commercial and residential sales and business development. Thank you, ladies, for joining me.
My pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. So again, wanted to make this a very coffee chat style format. I wanted to make sure that we all are comfortable and can share our own experiences. We all have different perspectives. I think one of the big things that we definitely want to highlight are some of those stats that is very familiar to us all. We pulled a few of these stats, and we also had a conversation about it earlier this week and prior to this conversation of the gender wage gap. I'll just pull those stats up now. And in the most recent study, it said that women earn 82 cents for every dollar for men of all races. In particular, when it comes to the solar industry, I know that you had a specific stat as well, right, Tara?
Yeah, we found 74 cents to every dollar specifically for the solar industry.
Yeah, and it was funny because it's not funny actually, but it's interesting. LinkedIn also has a stat when it comes to just in general job promotions and looking for those positions that women believe that they need to meet 100% of the criteria, while men usually apply after meeting only 60%. So these are two key stats that are alarming. It's the fact that it's facts right now. And I just wanted to first open it up with just a conversation of how you all just started your careers, because I know that you definitely highlight how we all should be approaching our career growth. You have your own tips and tricks of trying to navigate through these gender gaps that we see right now. But let's go ahead and start with Karima and tell us about your experience and just share a few tips.
Sure. Thank you so much. So my career has been kind of storied and through a bit of a circuitous path. I started in finance and then ended up moving into public health. And while those fields are not necessarily exactly the same as the solar field, there are some parallels in terms of switching from one industry to another and understanding how to actually navigate in a world that's not female dominated. So one particular thing that was valuable to me was understanding that I was leverage. Once I started working for an organization, I started to, and also at the same time founding my own organization, my own nonprofit, and having that employer-employee experience, I started to realize how hard it is to find people. To find people who do good work, to find people who fit in an institutional culture, to find people who get along well with their peers, and actually to understand why we use the term human resources. And because I really was a resource as an employee, and I saw the value in the resources that I had and the people who worked with me in my nonprofit. And understanding that I had leverage just in my very existence as a person who worked in an organization was really powerful for me. It made me feel that when I walked into a room to negotiate a salary or for an interview, that I had a foot to stand on. And in some ways, it evened out that power dynamic. I found that really helpful. Another thing that I found particularly helpful was actually from a TV show. I remember my very first salary negotiation, I walked into not realizing it was going to be that. I walked in for a meeting and it turned out to be a job offer. And the first thing I said was, I watched this TV show called The Good Wife last night, and they said that women never get raises because they never ask. So I'm just going to throw it out there. And I did. And the person I was speaking to wasn't the decision maker, but she said, you know what, that's true. And she said, I'll go ask and let you know. They got back to me a little while later, and they did give me a substantial increase from what I was asking for. That was an hourly job. This was while I was still a student. That really made me realize the power of the ask. I've had many no's since then, but it made me realize how easy it is to ask and how quickly that can translate into a tangible financial gain. And so that was a great experience for me to just really push me forward. The other final thing I'll say before letting anyone else share was the value of transferable skills between fields. As I was switching from finance to public health, and as some of you may be switching into the industry, I found that there actually were significant parallels, but oftentimes employers don't see that value. So I needed to do the job of being that interpreter. I literally needed to translate the value I created in the finance industry to the new industry I was going into, and literally take skill for skill. This is what I did there, and this is how it's relevant here. And I think that was a helpful way to be able to demonstrate my value without a lot of experience in that field.
Yeah, that's great. And you actually got a comment on LinkedIn that says, the power of the ask. Nice job. And I think that's
from Juliana Margulies. I think she said that. Yeah. She's tuning in today. She knows you. She inspired you.
Yeah, definitely. And including the whole pop culture reference, I think that definitely lightens the mood when it comes to a conversation. Suparna, let's go ahead and share some of your insights.
Sure. It was interesting to hear Karima's story. I think my path has also been, along the way, I think what I've always been looking for is a unique position. So often in my career, I've actually created positions that weren't there. And most of my roles were not there before, or were created, or obviously when you have your own business, then you create your own culture and environment. And so, what I would suggest to anybody starting out is kind of learn your strengths and weaknesses. And so a lot of times you might be in a place that's not quite leveraging what you're good at or what you can fully offer. And so you may need to try to shift your role a little bit or adjust or find something slightly different, even within the same organization. And then you can really demonstrate your value on top of being a good fit for the culture and environment and having the skills. So I've found that has definitely been something I never thought of when I first started out in my career. I had just assumed, okay, that's a job description. That's what you do, right? And that's not the case. You have a lot more leeway than you think to kind of shape your path and create your path.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. It's not, you don't limit yourself within the confines of that description. I think that's a good tip to take back. Tara.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit of I think, mix of experience between Karima and Suparna. I've sort of grown up in the solar industry. As my first job out of college. I told this at length. Nico interviewed me on SunCast in March last year. So if you want to hear the big detailed story, if you have the patience for it, you can tune in there. But I graduated from college. I wanted to be a lawyer, but had a little bit of a quarter life crisis, if you believe in that concept, and just decided I couldn't do another 3-4 years of schooling at that moment. So I signed up. I had a classmate who was in a leadership position at a temp agency, and signed up with the temp agency and ended up getting a job at what I thought was a lamp store called PowerLight in Berkeley, and walked in and, having done no research whatsoever on the company, walked in and certainly wasn't a lamp store, but I got hired as the receptionist there. and just started to prove myself valuable. I think that would be, so I'll give the tips along the way as I talk just a little snippet about how I grew up in this industry, but prove yourself valuable. There's always places and niches that you can find inside these companies, sort of to what Suparna was saying, where you can create value, you can even create opportunities for yourself by noticing, being very perceptive of any gaps where the company has, a need, or, even create the need for them, and you have a unique skill set that can fill that need. In my case, it was a little bit of that and a lot of bit of faith of the management team of PowerLight. Had really, really good experiences, really inspirational mentors there, and Tom Dinwiddie and Dan Shugar and Howard Wenger. And they saw my value and promoted me. And then SunPower acquired PowerLight in 2007 and continued to work for them and continued to demonstrate value, and really found that I really loved community organizing. And so creating events, creating space, and collaborative opportunities. So really developed the employee morale program at SunPower, which was a series of events, of engagement opportunities, employees, their families, outside analysts, things like that. Really, really enjoyed that work there. I did try to get out of the solar industry for a hot minute. I have a master's degree in something completely different, but the lure of solar was so strong, I had to come back. And so now I've been at PV Evolution Labs, or PVAL, since 2012. And again, kind of continued growing up within this company. Started out as the office manager and just really found myself, I'm a pretty outgoing person, found myself really gravitating towards sales roles and working with external customers. And so I held a bunch of those roles. DNVGL acquired PVAL in 2014. So again, continued to sort of build my career. And I would say a lot of my career growth since the early days has been self-generated. So asking for those promotions, realizing that, hey, I'm actually not even doing the job that my title describes anymore. I'm doing something completely different. And I might as well just ask for that next title and ask for that next raise, which is really hard to do. I give every person and every woman credit for, growing in your career and asking for that next level up, because, it takes a lot of guts, and it takes a lot of recognition of self-worth, which is often very hard for women in industry and in tech. So, wasn't easy for me, not by a long shot, but really tried to put myself out there and kind of grew and grew. And now, as an executive and co-founder and part owner of PV Evolution Labs, we divested from DNVGL last year in January, and, have just been growing and growing, and I don't know what's next. I love what I do. I love it so much. And I think that's also part of what makes a person successful, or what can make a person successful, is by really loving in what you do and believing in what you do. I believe in solar. I love this industry. I really love and believe in testing, solar product testing, which is what PV Evolution Labs does. So it makes it easy to find new and interesting ways to engage in the industry and engage in the company.
I think all three of you touched on this asking. It's huge. And I actually pulled a question from that. I know personally, from personal experience, asking is very difficult. There's a lot of work that you think you have to going into it. I personally felt like I had to research the salaries that are surrounding that position, see what the value, like you guys mentioned, the value of all the responsibilities I had. In addition, that's on top of the job description. So just for the audience, some of the tips or some of the things that you went through, just to prepare yourself for that ask.
I can go. So I think that's a really good point. So first of all, I think the ask is important, but I also want everyone who's ever asked and received a no to know that that is the most common answer. And that's for men and women. So there's a lot of really recent research showing that men and women, particularly at younger stages in the workforce. So I think Tara has a different stat out of college, which I'd love for you to share in a second. But once they're in the workforce at younger ages, apparently men and women do ask quite comparably. And throughout the life cycle of work, they do ask quite comparably, but men are more likely to get a yes. So 20% of men who ask will get a yes, and 15% of women who ask will get a yes. So that's important for two reasons. One, to know how often you can expect to get a yes and how persistent you need to be. And two, that differential between the two. Tara, do you want to share that statistic you had?
Yeah. So there was a study that found that right out of university, only 7% of female students will ask for, negotiate an initial job offer versus 57% of men will negotiate. And I think that, that reminds me a little bit of the stat we heard at the start of this about, men will apply for jobs when, they have 60% of the skills, figuring they can bluff through it or gain on-the-job training or whatnot, and women are perhaps harder on ourselves or conditioned to expect that we will fit 100% of the job description. So, that's a somewhat unfortunate reality, but I do have a lot of hope, and I think doing more of this kind of stuff and getting advice from women who are succeeding and who, through varied history in our careers, have broken through that glass ceiling of sorts. I mean, there are always new ones that present themselves in all kinds of different capacities, but in terms of achieving what we feel as success, there's also that aspect, right? Defining success. What does that mean for you? What is your glass ceiling? It can be so many different things. But, I would define myself as having had a successful breakthrough in my career. But I actually wanted to ask you, Glenda, a little bit too. We jumped onto the next question, but I wanted to hear, I know a little bit about your story. It's super cool and interesting. But yeah, wondering if you can share a little bit about your background. And, I'm sure you have experiences asking in your various male-dominated industries and what happens when you ask well, I'll let you tell.
Yeah, I've definitely taken a very unique path. For those who do know, they recognize it. But I was in sports marketing and also tier marketing for 10 plus years, and then moved into the solar and clean energy space almost 4 years ago. I'm working with Solar Power International and Solar Power events. So moving from two male-dominated industries, I think one of the things that I did learn, especially when I went into that interview for Solar Power International, was that I can make that comparison. And I think that was the biggest thing. I said that I had knowledge and I had experience targeting a specific audience. I worked with the Washington football team, and their audience is primarily male, white. And that's exactly what we were dealing with also with the clean energy space. And so I was able to make that experience, that comparison pretty evenly. And I think that was one of the things that I definitely took advantage of when it meant to at least make that comparison and make them know that I was familiar with having that conversation. It is unique. I mean, I think that we chatted about this, Tara, when it came to at least also in-person experiences, being around mostly men in the industry and in sports. It was one case, and now also in this space as well. I think one thing that I will say was different, at least when working internally at the office that I was at, was that there was a good amount of female representation, but it's when you went to the conferences that you recognized the divide, the fact that there was a huge difference in how many men and how many women came to these different conferences that I was going to. So it was interesting. It was obviously interesting, but I also took it as an opportunity for me to take advantage of having those conversations. So I immediately wanted to be involved with launching and developing the Women in Solar and Storage Luncheon. because I knew that was a platform that I was passionate about, and wanted to make it unique and take my experience into it. So I think that, I mean, you guys talked about it, the value. I knew that I had those experiences in my previous, I want to say, lifetime of working in sports, because this is a very different life now. But I wanted to make sure that I leveraged those skills that I gained and find that different affinity groups, and make sure that that the conferences that we were promoting represented the diversity that we wanted to have in the industry, and that reflects the world. So I was that person to make sure that we changed pictures out on the website because I said, well, this does not reflect how the industry should look like, or does look like, honestly, or how we're trying to make it. So very, very, very familiar space when I came into the solar and clean energy space. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been around, the only woman at the table. And especially, I mean, I'm sure Suparna has some experience with this too, being in sales and business development. And Suparna also has a engineering degree and a history in product development, which, is such a male-dominated space. I think maybe also one of the reasons why I'm so good at asking is because I've been in sales and I'm so used to no. That, if you're really aggressive and you're really a good salesperson, you, in this context, I learned a long time ago from a mentor, no is a request for more information. So you don't take no for the final answer. What other thing can I help sell? Can I sell you, or can I help solve your problem? Or, fine, if not this salary, how about this one, and come to an agreement. That's kind of the negotiation, the art of negotiation. But yeah, Suparna, sitting at a table full of men and, having to sort of hold your ground. What's that been like?
It's so funny, Tara, how you talk about the negotiation. So I did start my career as an engineer. So I think I came from a very opposite mindset where you're kind of trained to think that your work speaks for itself. And so I, never thought to ask for things and just assumed it was, came across in the work, which is not always the case, right? You learn over time that you have to sell yourself internally and really speak up about your value. So when I first started in the industry, I was at a module manufacturer, and then I went to, had my startup company, and then went to SunEdison. And I think I hadn't really noticed it at the module manufacturer. It was small. There were it was pretty diverse actually, on the factory floor there, although engineering was small enough. So I hadn't noticed it there. When I really noticed it would be when you get to more executive level stuff. So I used to go to like the SIA meetings or policy sessions, and it was all men and me. And at that time, new in my career. So, not when you're quite certain of yourself or having felt like you've proven yourself. And along the way, I feel like that is common, Tara, so often you're the only woman, and especially on the technology side, it's the numbers are even worse than on sales and marketing. And I specifically remember when SunEdison acquired my startup and we became part of that company. We were part of the R&D team, and I was one out of 100 women on that R&D team, which really shocks me that was the numbers. So you would see that it was better on finance or marketing or sales, but not on the engineering side. It got better over time, but lots of room for improvement. So, I mean, it's a pro and a con. If you recognize your value and what you have to offer, I think in a way you stand out, good or bad. And so you can kind of use that to demonstrate your value as well. And I was lucky to be around a lot of great supportive people. So I don't think I had the experiences that Glenda probably did.
Yeah, I was literally, my office was literally right above the locker rooms. So you'd always have to walk past them, the players, that is. Yeah, so it was a very interesting experience. Very different now, though. So, yeah. Karima, did you ever have an experience where just in your industry and also, I know in Ecologic and also with the company you own, where you're just really in the middle of just a male-dominated space?
All right, so you've got Salesforce for your sales team. How's that working out for you? How great would it be if someone could actually just come in and really make your whole solar sales process deliver results? And what's more, what if you could actually see all the sales data in one dashboard? Pipeline, forecast, aging, deals that are about to close, the whole darn thing. Look, I have someone who can help do all of that. They're called Indium. And right now, for a limited time, you can get a Salesforce tune-up, a process assessment from them entirely on the house. Just click on the Indium logo over at mysuncast.com and start getting more value from Salesforce finally. You know, it's the time of year where folks start moving around from business to business, job to job. Career transition is at its peak, and it's often a time where folks look to someone else to help organize their thoughts and guide their principles. I've spent the last 15 years in renewables. I've spent the last 5 years coaching founders and startup executives in this space specifically. And for the last year, I've been helping folks transition out of oil and gas and other industries into renewables. And I've found that there are a few things that are commonalities. I'd like to invite you, if that sounds like something you're interested in, to have a conversation with me about whether or not coaching might be in your future, and working with me might be something that would help level up your business or your personal career path. You can fill out an application over at mysuncast.com. Just click on the Work With Me button in the very top right. And everyone who fills out an application, I'm going to set up a 15-minute clarity call. So I'd invite you to fill that out if this sounds remotely interesting to you. And let's have a chat. See if there is, in fact, a fit. I look forward to chatting soon. Thank you so much for tuning into SunCast. Let me know if I can help you in other ways.
I think my entire career has been in very male-dominated spaces. And maybe it's a good time to actually talk about some strategies that we've used to navigate those spaces, particularly around asking for salaries. So a couple things that have helped me along the way. I kind of break it up into like the when, the what, and the how. So like the when is, when do you ask? And for me, I've always found it really helpful to have a sense of the financial health of the organization, and also of use some emotional intelligence to assess the person who will be making this decision for you. Because that person will either make the decision, who you want to have the conversation with, that person will either make the decision of whether you get the raise, or they're going to be the person going to bat for you with the higher ups. So knowing just, are they in a good space in their life? Is the organization in a healthy financial space? Knowing those two things and trying to align your ask with that, I think is helpful. Viewing the ask as a longer, it's not one point in time where you sit there and say, hey, give me more money. It's actually, it starts at this point, right? Where you start to scout, what is the situation? And around that when, I think there's two kinds. One is planned, where you have an upcoming performance review, or you request a performance review or a conversation around salary where you can really prepare. Another is opportune. So one example for me that was an unexpected salary raise was when they asked me to circulate a job posting. And it was for the same job I was in. They just wanted someone new. And I looked at it and I was like, the salary range you have here, like I'm in the mid-high, but I am not at the highest. And why are you even offering a higher salary to someone from outside when I've been here, I'm doing the job. So I responded right away, like within 5 minutes. I didn't even think, I just said, absolutely happy to circulate, but given my seniority, I think I deserve to be at the top of this range. And I think if I thought about it more, I wouldn't have had the guts to do it, but it ended up meaning that they bumped me. So that was awesome. But every other one in my experience, and definitely I'm open to hearing from everyone else, has been more of a planned situation. For me, I haven't had set performance reviews, so it's been about requesting them. and using them as an opportunity to ask, but also to ask for a higher salary, but also to ask, what can I do better? So that takes me to the second part, which is what to ask for. So money is always a piece of that conversation, but money is not the only thing associated with your full compensation package. That's your salary, but it's not your only negotiating tool. You can ask for, there's a whole world of benefits. There's benefits first and then employer contributions to benefits. There's time off. There's alleviation of other responsibilities that might be taking away from you being able to do your full job. There's contribution to professional development. There's, if your company, if you ask for them to pay for you to do a course, not only does that mean you're bringing new skills back to the company, it means you don't have to pay for that. And you have one more way to demonstrate value the next time you want to negotiate. So it's thinking kind of multidimensionally around what you're asking for, and having a couple, have your, this is what I want, so I'm going to ask for a little bit higher. Have that, but also have these other pieces that you can negotiate with. I think those are really powerful. And sometimes when companies don't have the ability to be as flexible on salary, they can be more flexible in other ways. So when you demonstrate your value effectively, you can maybe move the pieces in some of those areas. And then the final piece I'll say is the how. So how do you actually ask what we just say this word? So in my experience, and it's based on what you're comfortable with. In my experience at the beginning, I would use humor, like I said. Now I think I'm more of a straight shooter. I generally prefer to do that conversation in person or on a phone call in this day and age, but I prime it with an email. So I've always emailed a superior saying, I want to have a discussion about my compensation. Can we set up a time? So I prime them. I don't want to surprise them. I want them to know what it's going to be about. And then in that actual conversation, I'm very specific about what I'm looking for. So hello, how are you? But I called the meeting, so I'm the chair and I'm leading the meeting. And that might be a role reversal from how you normally interact with your superior. And I would lay out my case. This is how I've added value. If you can quantify it based on your industry, that's great. I've brought in this many clients. I've raised this much money, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can quantify what you're asking as a percentage of money you've brought in, even better. That hasn't been the case in my industries. But being able to specifically say, this is the value I've demonstrated, and this percentage increase, I think, would be an appropriate representation of the value that I'm bringing. And then the most important part after that is just stop. Just pause and listen. It's uncomfortable. It's really hard once you put a number out there. But I think that's really, really important, because the point here is you're not listening for a yes or a no. You're listening for a why, and you're reading their behavior. Are they comfortable with this? Could you have gotten more? Are they uncomfortable with it? Do they seem to be on your side, but they're thinking, how can I make this happen? Are they worried you're going to leave? What are they thinking? And so don't listen for a no, listen for a why. Even if they say no, we can't because we don't have enough money in this and way. No, you've just gotten here. You don't have enough experience. Use everything that comes after the no and be prepared to rebut them. So what I mean by that is come prepared with your research case. Suparna mentioned, do the research around the same job at other organizations, or if you know what other people are being paid in your organization. Well, this is what I'm being paid here, but this is what I can get there, or what someone else is getting there. And I think I offer the same value. Identify opportunities for efficiency. If money's tight, if in this role, these are additional ways I can continue to do this job. And these are ways that I think I can actually increase efficiency and ultimately be a financial benefit for the company. And framing what you can do, not just on what you have done, but on what you will do. So using keywords like continue. I will continue to do this. I'd like to do this better. With these resources, I can do more of that. I think that frames it from an employer's perspective as you're making an investment and you will see a return, rather than, hey, I did that before, can you pay me now? And that change in the frame of reference, I think, can make it a lot easier to get to a yes. And the final thing is, if you do get a no after all of that, I recommend asking for an interim performance appraisal, or, I appreciate that. I understand. I'd like to continue this conversation in 6 months. Can we set a date? And the reason for that is so that, one, you don't have to wait a whole year if that's the cycle your company works on to ask again. But two, between now and that 6-month period, you communicate your value. Everything you do, you communicate to your boss, and your boss will know that everything you're doing, you're counting down until that time. And I guarantee they will come at that time with something to sweeten the pot for you, and it will keep that conversation going. So those are some of the strategies that I've used, and I'd love to hear from all three of you as to if any of those have worked for you, if there's other tactics you've taken.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I think that understanding the entire compensation package that you get from your employer is huge. I mean, I think one thing that I definitely did when I was going to a position was when they couldn't budge with the actual salary, and I, despite asking several times, I did bring in the transportation compensation, either including a Metro card or a Metro money towards Metro transportation or something like that, or also days off as well. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and I can speak from this. I mean, I have plenty of things to say from the employee perspective, but specifically from the employer perspective now, I have a team of 10, and I love when people ask, I love when they recognize their value, they ask for more money, and, I don't always have budget to pay more money, but I think, you make a really good point, both Karima and Glenda, in, what else can I do for employees? What is in my power? What needs to go to the board? That kind of thing. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value both for the employer and the employee in working with them to figure out, okay, if I can't pay you more, what else would make you feel, appreciated and valued and taken care of here, whether that's, more time working from home. Now we're all working from home, but, previously, if it's more time working from home, if it's some comp days when there are particularly late nights working on projects, if, they want to, work out of country for 3 weeks of the year, like what other things can the employee propose, or can I think of and collaborate with the employee to figure out how they can be compensated if budget doesn't allow the actual, the comp increase, the salary increase. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that kind of expanding the pie approach. It's not really a fixed pie, and even though budgets might be fixed, there are a lot of soft things that might be valuable to you as an employee that may not cost your employer anything, but would be meaningful. And so I would say, work from home, flexible schedule, all of those things, which now is a full-time reality, but before, those things definitely had value and were not always readily available. So,
yeah, I find.
Go ahead, Tara.
Well, I was just going to say for staff who have children, sometimes a huge relief is to figure out some sort of schedule that works around the kids' schedule, or being more flexible in maternity or returning to work after maternity. And those are all things that are within, I won't speak for all employers, but certainly within my power to negotiate and be flexible with the employee. And I find that from my own perspective, being an employee and now as an employer, that kind of flexibility and that kind of compromise goes a really long way in an employee feeling like, their employer takes care of them, that they're appreciated, that they are valuable. Certainly on the other side of it, when I was reporting to folks, there wasn't always budget for a salary increase, but, having again, that courage to ask for, well, how about a work from home day, or how about, can I work a Saturday this week instead of a Wednesday so I can go to something. So, just all kinds of creative ways that a compensation package can be adjusted if not just for money.
Yeah, because a lot of those items are all in different budget lines. Salaries are obviously, for the most part, from my understanding and experience in different organizations, salaries are a completely different budget line from, like you mentioned, Karima, the professional development bucket, and other places where they could pull money from. So it's definitely something we should include in those conversations. I wanted to jump into, we have a comment from one of our viewers. Had a question. She said, I'd love to hear someone speak about skipping a level for the ask if you don't connect well with your manager or you feel your manager is ignoring your value offers. Now I want to jump into that.
I have something, but I would open up to Karima and Suparna if you have a comment.
I can. Sorry, go ahead, Suparna.
Go ahead, Karima. I don't know that I have a good relevant experience with that, to be fair.
Okay, I can add a brief comment and then pass it to Tara. So I haven't personally experienced this, but in general, the two things that would come to mind for me are, one, if there's more than just your manager, if there are other people at your manager's level who you could have a conversation with, but in a group setting. I don't think it's wise to skip over your manager or talk to someone else, but to ask if you can have that conversation with your manager and someone else. I think often if that's an individual interpersonal issue, then you can kind of dilute that by having other people in the room. And particularly if there are people your manager reports to, if that makes sense. But you really have to read kind of the relationships that exist in your organization, if that's logical or not. I wouldn't go into that if that's not someone you've ever spoke to, if that's not the norm. Another thing I would work on is actually speaking with my coworkers. I think it really varies in organizations. In some organizations, a rising tide raises all boats. So if I'm pushing for a raise and my coworker's pushing for a raise and someone else is pushing for a raise, it tells them, hey, we need to rethink salaries and there's an issue here. In other cases, it's a fixed budget and maybe I want to keep it secret from that person so I don't rise ahead. But I'm kind of the perspective that let's just all get better together. And I don't necessarily want to move forward without someone else. So if you're kind of leading that collective group of, hey, we all are looking to rise higher, then that also dilutes the interpersonal relationship you may have with your manager. So those are two tips from me. Tara, do you have anything to add?
I was going to say something completely different. While probably today I would completely agree with you and keep your manager involved. Sometimes it's difficult and maybe there's just not a good interpersonal relationship with the manager above. And I think, I would give the advice that don't let that stop you from asking for what you feel like you deserve. And if there is an interpersonal conflict, I think, there can be ways to deal with that internally, but I wouldn't stop at that person if that person says no, and especially over and over when you're clearly proving your value. And like, Karima very, very nicely laid out. I hope people were taking notes because that was a mic drop moment. Your previous set of comments on tips of how to negotiate the salary. But I would say, if you're not getting anywhere and you're doing all the things right and you are adding a lot of value to the organization, I wouldn't stop at your direct manager. And my personal experience at a previous company, I felt like a particular employee, a colleague of mine, wasn't getting paid what he deserved. And he also wasn't very good at asking and knowing how to ask. He wasn't, he didn't feel like he had the courage to ask. So I went about on his behalf to the line manager, and the line manager, didn't do anything. So, I happened to have a good relationship with the manager, actually two above. And I proposed it to her and I said, look, this employee, he is directly contributing to the bottom line at this company. He is personally, pushing through X dollars of revenue every month with his hands-on contribution at the company. And, he really deserves it. And she had the power to just like that. And then she sent an email to the HR manager and raised the salary to the salary I had proposed for him. And so, that felt really good to advocate on behalf of a colleague, like you were saying also, Karima, that, sometimes you got to talk to your colleagues and don't stop. If you really do feel like you're adding value to the organization, your line manager above is not listening or is not willing to negotiate. Don't stop there.
I wanted to add one thing to that. So to Tara's first point about going beyond your manager if you're not seeing success. I agree with that also. One thing, when I had those in-person conversations and I didn't feel like I was being heard, a good step after that is to send an email to summarize everything that we discussed, i.e. create a paper trail so that you're essentially documenting that we had this conversation, I laid this out. My understanding is that there's not an opportunity for a raise this time, X, Y, Z. The next time you have that same conversation, do it again. And essentially build that up so that when you do go above your manager's head, if that's the path that you choose to take, you have some evidence to explain why you did that. And I think that would give you a really solid foundation for taking such an action.
Yeah, agreed. Paper trail is a blessing and a curse, but in this case, it's definitely to be able to show a history of contribution, improving your value, and requesting those increases. Definitely valuable.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing, Tara. Just definitely second that. I think that paper trail is huge a lot of times, and even in personal experience that you ask and they give you, oh, well, in 6 months, we'll probably have the ability to push the salary a little bit. And I've had that experience. Well, all I had was that verbal agreement and nothing came from it. So, I mean, yeah, I completely agree. So we had another question actually come through. I know we touched on it a little bit. Have you talked about how to negotiate a higher salary when you're first offered that position? I know we talked about looking at the overall compensation package, but did you guys have any other additional strategies to really work on that first position?
I can chime in here. So I think I've just started kind of knowing where I want to be and opening with that, actually. So setting the baseline expectations in early conversations and just saying, this is where I want to be. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. If that's not going to match up, then thanks for your time, and, keep other conversations going. And so I found that it's actually appreciated. A lot of people don't like to talk about the compensation side, right? People leave that for the end. They don't want to touch on it, but it's such an important part of the conversation, and really, you don't want to be on the wrong path. I don't know that I would have done that early in my career when I was first trying to get into solar. I did a lot of stuff for free, for low cost. So, just to break in, and I would probably do that again. So, I'm in a different place after some experience that put me in a different place where I knew what my value was. And, in terms of negotiating the higher salary, I think it's important to know what your value is, what your market value is. Look at the comparables, look at other companies, look at what the other job offers are giving. If you're talking to multiple employers, know what's on the table for each of them, and make sure they're aligned with where you want to be up front. And then I think it's, sometimes just knowing that gives you the strength to kind of stand for what you want and stay strong in what you want. And I think that's probably the uncomfortable part of it, but a really important part. And so I've just transitioned to being very upfront about it, to be honest. And I found that to be very effective because I know my value, and I think I can demonstrate that, and people can see that. That's the benefit of the time and the experience now. So it's harder to have that at the early part of your career, but you still have value, as Karima said, in terms of work ethic and other skills that you bring to the table, maybe not industry specific knowledge, but in terms of whether you're a fit. And so I'll try to align things early. And if not, be talking to multiple places, ideally, because then you have some extra leverage that way. You have options.
Yeah, I would say too, just come prepared. Just what Suparna was saying, or part of that is, if your hiring manager likely has a range, and if you're proposing a salary or they'll propose a salary that's maybe at the lower end of the range, maybe this is a little bit different in sales, but, I think most hiring managers expect some kind of negotiation. If you just take whatever is offered to you, maybe that says a lot about you, who you are, and and your willingness to just sort of take what's given to you, versus if you counter and you have good points, if you're coming right out of school and you have some good points about your education. If you're just coming out of a different industry where you have transferable skills, and you can show that, you have the skill set or you have the value of more of that mid-range, according to your own research, which you would bring, those points to the table, to the negotiating table. I think most employers do expect some kind of negotiation. So as long as you're prepared and you have your justification as to why you would want a higher salary than what they're initially offering, a lot of times you'll at least get heard. Maybe you won't get that salary, but at least, you'll maybe feel better that you at least put yourself out there and ask for something a little bit higher. And, sometimes maybe you'll get it. If you prove your case and the hiring manager has that range and they have leeway to go a little bit higher, sometimes you will get that.
The average salary increase in a current job is about 1 to 5%. But the average salary increase when you switch jobs is about 10 to 20%. So I think when you're offered a position, whether it's your first job or later in your career, that is your most powerful opportunity to negotiate a salary. And given that every salary increase after that is going to be a percentage of that original salary, there are compound impacts on what you negotiate on that for that first salary. So I would say go hard. I echo everything that Suparna and Tara said. And if you still get a no, then I would take the same advice I mentioned earlier, which is say that you want to check back in 6 months. Because if you have to wait 1 year every time, then the compound impact is longer. But if you can shorten that time period, then again, you allow yourself to compound faster. So it's really just math at the end of the day. And I would say that is the time to really put your foot down and try to negotiate hardball as much as you can.
It's something I wish I did going in my first job. Go hard. That first job.
Yeah, I do too. It would have, if you think about, your first job, whether it's out of high school or college, you're setting yourself up on a track. You're building your resume and you're building your salary range. So, if you go in and you just accept whatever the first thing they give you, most employers want to get the most value for the cheapest price, like sort of business 101. So they are going to offer you the lowest that they think they can get away with. And it's really up to you to negotiate higher. And that sets your track in so many ways in your career, because you're going to be building from there. Oftentimes employers or new employers will say, well, what were you making at your previous company? And if you're making this range and you're asking for a big jump, you're going to have to really justify that, versus if you're jumping and you're making those incremental improvements or incremental increases, I should say, off of those first salaries, you're going to set yourself up in a much better place to, increase salary over your career.
Well, and also that's, if you do get a no after the ask, it's still an opportunity to try to leverage those other pieces. So never forget that there are other things that may be important to you as part of that job that are valuable to you that you can ask for and trade. It may not be salary, but maybe it's a bonus. Maybe there's bonus structures. Maybe there's performance-based bonus, which is common in sales, but not as common in other types of roles, right? There's other
stock options,
stock options, right? Yeah. 401k, the matching. Like there's other ways to increase even the financial benefit to yourself outside of just a straight salary. So it's important to kind of think through that, and you can be creative.
And what they offer you is, as Tara said, is going to be what they think they can get you for. And we live in an environment where that will be lower if you are a woman, that will be lower if you are a woman of color, that will be lower if they know you come from lower socioeconomic background or you didn't go to an Ivy League school or whatever. So knowing all of that means that means that you can guess what they will offer and what they've used to calculate that offer, and you can counter that even more strongly. So be aware of the intersection of gender and race and income and all of those things that go into these salaries that we often don't think about or like to pretend don't exist, but they do. And hopefully with some of the strategies we shared, we can all work together to achieve greater pay equity in our society.
Yeah. Well, from Glenda's stat that women are making, 20% less. So next time you go into your interview, just tack that 20% on. What's the worst that can happen? If you're really valuable and the company wants to hire you, they'll, there could be a negotiation, but, tack that 20% on. Just be bold and be aggressive with your value.
Great tips. Go hard, be bold, aggressive. Yes, definitely.
It's hard. I fully acknowledge that.
Yeah,
especially if you're just starting out.
Yeah, I was in that same space too. I wanted to loop back around because I actually remembered a question I wanted to ask. We talk about value. We talk about obviously everything else, but part of that value, all three of you have a pretty extensive educational background. How do you think that has definitely helped in salary and everything? So you have your MBAs, PhDs between the three of you. How has that helped? And do you think that it's necessary? And obviously it might be different across different fields, but did anyone, let's go with Karima. I know you have a PhD.
Yeah. Sure. I think it helps when you're starting out, for sure. I think when you're starting out and your resume is a little lighter, I think education weighs heavily. And the things you've done, and I don't think that's necessarily the way it should be, but I think it's just the way it is. But I think as you move on through your career, the education becomes a lot less of a heavyweight on your resume, and the jobs you've held and actually the line items that you have on your resume that specify the actual value you added end up carrying a lot more weight. So education's important, but at the end of the day, different people have access to different educational opportunities. And if you haven't had access to the same opportunities that you might have liked to have, I think there are ways to overcome that. And using education as a platform for networking, that's valuable. But there's other ways to get to networking. There's other ways to expand your network and build references and people who know you and people who recognize your value. And I think education serves as a proxy for that, but it's not the only proxy. So I appreciate and I'm very grateful for the education that I've had, and it's helped me along the way. But I definitely think that there are ways to learn what you learn through formal education outside of the classroom.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit of a poster child for that. I wanted to go to law school. So an undergraduate, I got a degree in English and women's studies. And, not exactly transferable to a very technical field. So, in some ways, in some companies, like at DNVGL, for example, they're a humongous company. Worked for DNVGL for 4 years. They're a humongous company, and there has to be very specific metrics for increasing salaries. You have to hit certain milestones, and that makes a lot of sense for a big company where they need to be equitable across, thousands and thousands of employees across multiple countries. And in some of those environments, especially in tech, the tech degrees and the tech advancement is valued higher than non-tech, even though we know that there are a lot of different paths for education and for getting into, learning the skills. For me, it was a lot of on-the-job training. And just like you were saying, Karima, the resume building was, my education at this point is, almost irrelevant. I do have a master's degree, but again, it's irrelevant to, what I'm doing now, except for those basic sort of continuing education skills and writing skills and speaking skills and, those kinds of things that are just, you have to have them for every job just about. But yeah, I would say, education, although I do believe in it. I also think you can get there with equivalent work experience, like you were saying, Karima.
Do you want to add on to that, Suparna?
No, I mean, I second what both Karima and Tara said. I think there's so much you learn along the way, right? And if you're doing a very technical job, definitely my engineering degree has helped me in a lot of the roles that I've been. It's been very valuable from a training perspective. But Tara's been able to learn a lot of that on the job, right? And then that's the reality of it. I think Karima's right. It's looked at very strongly at the beginning of your career because there aren't many other normalized metrics that people know, right? And then as you have more experiences, then those are carry a lot more weight. So, and there's a lot of different ways to get to the same place.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for any hiring manager out there to listen to this and to take it to heart that, when you're building a job description, there you could be leaving out so many qualified candidates by putting this minimum threshold of education that maybe not everybody has had access to. And, it's so important to not leave out, a huge population that could be very experienced for the role, but they don't have that minimum bachelor's degree or associate's degree or something like that, whatever that minimum threshold is. So recognizing that work experience is oftentimes, being an employer is oftentimes even more valuable than the book education. If you've got somebody who's had a couple of years of work experience, whether that's working in a restaurant or as a mechanic or something like that, being in the workforce and starting to build the skill set of required to work in a company is often more valuable than the degree itself.
Awesome. Well, we're slightly over, but before we end this, I wanted to give you guys the opportunity, at least if you do have any takeaways you want to share with everyone before we close out.
I would say your pay should reflect your value, but your value is not a reflection of your pay. So just remember that.
Suparna?
I think just recognize what you're worth and kind of keep track of that. It's hard to remember when you're in those moments, asking in those tough situations, but be your biggest advocate and take that step. It gets easier the more you do it. So.
Yeah. And Tara?
75% of people who ask for a pay increase get it. So keep that in mind. And just continue to ask for what you deserve. Negotiate. You'll find oftentimes a willing participant in your would-be employer or current employer, and to hiring managers. Value your employees, look at their whole skill set, look at their background, look at their previous jobs, look at the education, and really be willing to negotiate. If you have somebody, either a current employee or somebody who's trying to get a job, and they feel that they have more value than you're initially, willing to compensate, hear them out and be open. Have an open mind about if it's not a financial compensation, what other ways can you compensate this person who maybe you don't know yet, but they're saying that they have this value, they're proving it to you. Take a leap of faith on the hiring manager or on the manager giving a raise. Be open-minded about that.
All right, that's a wrap on today's conversation, Solar Warriors, but I do hope that you'll check out the other 2 for Tuesday episodes and let me know what you think of these shorter format discussions. You want more like this? You can find more than 200 episodes, resources, highlights from the discussions, along with social media links to each guest episode, book recommendations, and so much more over on the blog at mysuncast.com. And that's also where you'll find other ways to engage with the SunCast tribe, like subscribing to our weekly emails, or even joining the exclusive inner circle we affectionately refer to as the Guild. If you're on Spotify or iTunes, I so appreciate your rating and review so that others can also find SunCast more easily. A special thank you to our sponsors who help make this podcast possible. You can learn more about them at mysuncast.com/sponsor. Follow the links there for any offers we've discussed here today. Remember, you are what you listen to. Thanks again for showing up, Solar Warrior. It's half the battle.